Imagine it's 12th of July, 1998. You're a 34-year-old taxi driver living in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Your small apartment is hot, your yellow Brazil shirt is hanging from a chair, and the television is already on even though kickoff is still hours away. Your wife is cooking rice and beans in the kitchen, your son is drawing the number 9 on a piece of paper, and every neighbor in the building is talking about one name, Ronaldo. You have 30 rays folded in your pocket from the morning shift, just enough for gas, bread, and a few cold drinks for the match. All week, it has felt like Brazil was not just going to play France in a World Cup final, but walk into history with the best young striker on earth leading the way. If you have ever wondered why one strange night in football can still make millions of people whisper, "Stay with me," what you're about to hear is not just a wild theory, it is a pattern. It is what happens when fame, money, pressure, secrecy, and national pride all meet in the same locked room. And if you find value in this kind of historical clarity, subscribing takes 2 seconds and keeps you ahead of what most people never stop to question. Then the room changes. The words begin to spread before kickoff. Ronaldo is not in the starting team. Then he is back in the starting team. No one can explain it clearly. The neighbors stop joking. The announcers sound confused. The boy with the number 9 on his paper looks at the screen and asks why the hero looks so pale. And on the other side of the ocean, inside the Stade de France in Saint-Denis, a 21-year-old man who had suffered convulsions before the biggest match of his life is walking out to face France. Brazil lost that final 3-0, with Zinedine Zidane scoring twice and Emmanuel Petit scoring in stoppage time. And the official facts are strange enough before any theory is added. 1. This video is about the mystery of Ronaldo in the 1998 World Cup final. Not the loud version, where every rumor is treated like proof. The careful version. The human version. The version where the most important question is not simply, who forced him to play? The deeper question is, what kind of machine can make a sick young man, a coach, a sponsor, a football federation, a country, and a billion viewers all move toward the same impossible moment? The night was not a lightning strike. It was a pressure cooker. And by the time the lid shook, the heat had been building for years. Before we go further, there is something important to understand. A football conspiracy is not always a group of people in a dark room making an evil plan. Sometimes it is more like a crowded elevator. Everyone wants to get to the top floor, but nobody wants to say who is pushing. A sponsor wants its star on the screen. A federation wants money and glory. A coach wants his best player. A player wants to prove he is not weak. A nation wants a hero. Each force is small by itself, but together they become a river, and even strong people can be carried away. The core mechanism is simple. A human being becomes an asset. An asset means something valuable, like a house, a company, or in this case, a player whose face sells shoes, shirts, television time, and dreams. Ronaldo was not only Brazil's number 9. By 1998, he was the image of the future. Fast, powerful, smiling, unstoppable. Nike had a major deal with the Brazilian Football Federation, known as the CBF, and Brazilian lawmakers later examined that relationship through a parliamentary inquiry. The Brazilian Chamber of Deputies reported that the CBF and Nike sponsorship contract was worth $160 million over 10 years, and that 8 first-team players were required for certain scheduled matches, while Nike said the technical staff still chose the players. 2. That does not prove Nike forced Ronaldo to play. It does show why people ask the question. Money does not need to kick down the door. Sometimes it simply sits in the room, heavy and silent, like a grand piano hanging from the ceiling. Everyone can see it. No one has to touch it, but everyone knows what happens if the rope breaks. This brings us directly to the first part of the story, the day itself. Ronaldo had arrived at the tournament as the brightest young star in football. He was 21 years old. He had already been called O Fenomeno, which means the phenomenon, because he seemed less like a normal striker and more like a storm wearing boots. Brazil had reached the final after beating Chile 4-1, Denmark 3-2, and the Netherlands on penalties after a 1-1 semifinal, and Ronaldo had scored 4 goals before the final. 3. But on the afternoon of 12th of July, the story stopped being about tactics. Reports later described Ronaldo returning to the team hotel, the Chateau de Grand Romain, after lunch. He was sharing a room with Roberto Carlos. Then something frightening happened. Ronaldo suffered convulsions, which means his body shook without control, and he lost consciousness. BBC later described him telling Gary Lineker that he had convulsions and was unconscious for several minutes before the final. 4. Think about that. Not a sore ankle, not a bad stomach. A young man loses control of his body hours before the World Cup final. In any normal workplace, that is the moment the machine stops. The lights go on, the emergency plan begins. But this was not a normal workplace. This was the World Cup final. This was Brazil. This was Ronaldo. This was a global show already. rolling toward kickoff like a train with no brakes. At about 7:48 p.m. local time, 72 minutes before kickoff, Brazil's first team sheet was submitted without Ronaldo. Edmundo was named instead. Around 8:18 p.m., a revised team sheet appeared, and Ronaldo was back in the starting lineup. The Irish Times later called the whole episode a story of claims, counterclaims, rumors, and political maneuvering, and that description matters because the confusion was not added later by fans. The confusion was there in real time. 5. Now imagine being Edmundo. You're told you are starting a World Cup final. The biggest door of your career opens. Then, minutes later, it closes. Imagine being Zagallo, Brazil's coach. He had won World Cups as a player and coach, yet now he had to decide whether the most important player in the world was fit to play. Imagine being Ronaldo. The whole country expects you to carry it, and suddenly your own body has betrayed you. The locker room was not a team room anymore. It was a ship in fog, and the captain could not see the rocks. France did not wait for Brazil to find its balance. Zidane scored with a header in the 27th minute. Then he scored another header in first-half stoppage time. Later, even after Marcel Desailly was sent off in the 68th minute, France still held firm, and Petit scored the third in the 90th minute plus stoppage time. That is one of the counterintuitive facts people forget. France played part of the final with 10 men, but Brazil still looked drained, flat, and strangely empty. 6. The ordinary. People watching in Brazil felt more than defeat. They felt cheated by uncertainty. If Brazil had simply lost to a better France, it would have hurt, but this was different. First, Ronaldo was out. Then he was in. Then he played like a shadow of himself. The scoreboard said 3-0, but the feeling in millions of homes was not just sadness, it was suspicion. When a story has a missing hour, people fill it with ghosts. Here is something I want you to think about before we go further. If the best player in the world gets sick hours before the biggest game on earth, who should have the final say? The player, the doctor, the coach, the sponsor, or the tournament itself? Drop your answer in the comments, seriously. Because what I am about. To show you next is the part of this story that most people never hear. The Ronaldo mystery feels unique, but sport has seen this pattern before, and once you see the pattern, the 1998 final looks less like a single strange night and more like one page in a much larger book. This leads to the second part of this story. The problem is not always secret evil. Sometimes the problem is incentives. An incentive is a reward that pushes people to act a certain way. If a child gets candy every time he cleans his room, candy becomes the push. In football, incentives can be points, money, fame, TV ratings, or survival. And when the reward is big enough, people may do things that look ugly, even if they never meet in secret. On 25 June 1982, West Germany played Austria. At the El Molinón Stadium in Gijón, Spain, Algeria had already played its final group match the day before. Because of that schedule, West Germany and Austria knew exactly what result would send both of them through and eliminate Algeria. West Germany scored early and won 1-0. After that, the match became slow, safe, and lifeless. It became known as the disgrace of Gijón, and FIFA later moved to simultaneous final group matches to reduce that kind of problem. 7. This is a perfect mirror for understanding 1998. In Gijón, the scandal was not that someone found a signed secret agreement. The scandal was that the structure allowed a result that looked rotten. The rules created a hallway with only one easy exit, and two teams walked through it. Fans did not need a confession to feel that something had gone wrong. They could see it on the grass. The same thing happened emotionally with Ronaldo. People did not need a signed order from Nike to feel that something was wrong. The structure was already suspicious. A global star, a giant sponsor, a federation contract, a sudden medical event, a changed team sheet, a poor performance. A humiliating loss. The facts lined up like dark windows in an empty building. Maybe there was nothing behind them, but from the street, it looked haunted. In 1982, the people hurt most were Algerian players and fans. They had beaten West Germany 2-1 earlier in the tournament, a huge result, but still went home because the final schedule gave others knowledge they did not have. Ordinary Algerians did not experience the event as a dry rules problem. They experienced it as a door being locked after they had done enough to walk through it. That is how mistrust is born, not from one bad call, from a system that lets people believe the truth was decided somewhere else. After Gijón, football learned one clear lesson. Do not build a tournament where teams can know too much before the last match. Do not give people a reward for making the game smaller. In simple words, if you leave meat on the table, do not act shocked when dogs enter the room. The rule makers did not have to prove every thought inside every player's head. They only had to see that the design was broken. Now bring that back to Paris in 1998. The question is not only whether someone ordered Ronaldo to play. The question is whether the system around him made not playing almost impossible. That is different. And it is more uncomfortable. Because if the pressure came from everywhere, then everyone can deny being the source. The sponsor can say it never selected the team. The coach can say the doctors cleared him. The player can say he wanted to play. The federation can say the decision was sporting. Each answer may be partly true, but the machine still moves. Now here is where it gets interesting. In January 2001, Ronaldo testified before a Brazilian congressional inquiry and denied that Nike forced him to play. He said he played only after medical tests showed he was clinically and physically fit. He also said the only thing Nike asked of him was that he wear their boots. The Guardian reported that his account matched Zagallo's position, which was that Ronaldo was selected after tests and after saying he felt able to play. 8. That testimony is important. It is not a small detail. If we are being honest, we have to say this clearly. There is no public proof that Nike forced Ronaldo onto the pitch. But history is often messy because the absence of proof does not erase the reasons people became suspicious. A clean, official answer can still arrive too late. Once trust is cracked, every explanation sounds like a repair job on a broken vase. This brings us to the third major point. Conspiracies grow in the gap between what people see and what institutions explain. An institution is a large organized group like FIFA, a federation, a league, or government. If that group speaks slowly, hides details, or changes the story, the gap opens. Into that gap go rumors, anger, jokes, radio shows, newspaper columns, and family arguments that last for decades. The 2002 World Cup in South Korea and Japan gives us another example. South Korea made a historic run to the semifinals. That achievement was real. The team was fit, brave, organized, and backed by wild home support. But their knockout. Matches against Italy and Spain became famous for refereeing controversy. Italy lost 2-1 in extra time against South Korea after Francesco Totti was sent off, and Spain later had disputed goals ruled out before losing on penalties. The Guardian later described those games as examples of heavy home advantage in refereeing, while also saying it was not claiming corruption. 9. Again, notice the pattern. Millions of viewers watched strange decisions in matches where the host nation benefited. Where the referees bought, that is a much higher claim, and it needs proof. But did fans feel the tournament had tilted? Yes, and that feeling mattered. Italy's players, Spain's players, and their fans did not walk away thinking only about tactics. They walked away thinking the field itself had leaned. This matters for the Ronaldo story because the strongest conspiracies are not built from pure fantasy. They are built from real confusion. In 2002, the real confusion was the refereeing. In 1982, it was the schedule. In 1998, it was the medical event and the team sheet. Each case had a different shape, but the same shadow. People saw power and uncertainty standing next to each other. That is enough to make suspicion grow. And sometimes, to make matters worse, real corruption does exist in football. In 2006, the Calciopoli scandal hit Italy. Juventus were relegated to Serie B and stripped of their last 2 league titles, while other clubs were also punished after an Italian tribunal into sporting fraud. This does not prove every rumor in football is true. It proves the opposite lesson. Because some scandals are real, people become more willing to believe the next one. 10. Think of trust like a stadium roof. It can survive rain, it can survive wind. But if beams have failed before, every new crack makes people look up. After Calciopoli, after strange refereeing nights, after the disgrace of Gijón, fans learned that football is not always pure. So when Ronaldo walked onto the field looking unwell after being removed and restored to the team sheet, the public mind already had a shelf ready for the story. The label on that shelf said, something happened. The surprising fact is that the official denial and the conspiracy can both come from the same emotional place. Ronaldo denied selling the World Cup or being part of a plot. Years later, he mocked the idea that Brazil sold the final and said such theories damaged the credibility of the players. UOL reported him saying the theory involved the CBF, FIFA, and Nike, and that a congressional inquiry even examined the matter. 11. That is painful. Because for Ronaldo, the conspiracy did not just explain a defeat, it accused him. It turned a sick 21-year-old into a suspect. Fans wanted a villain big enough to match their heartbreak. But sometimes history gives us something harder than a villain. It gives us a system where many people act under pressure and no single person wants to carry the blame. Most people will never know what you now know. Most people will keep watching the final score and missing the machinery behind it. If you're still here, you are not most people. Hit subscribe, because the next section is the part this channel was made for, and the part they never put in the highlight reels. Now observe what all of these cases have in common. The same mechanism, different countries, different decades, same result. In 1982, the structure rewarded West Germany and Austria for playing a dead match. In 1998, the structure made it almost unthinkable that the world's biggest star would sit out the world's biggest game. In 2002, unclear and disputed decisions made millions wonder whether a host nation had been protected. In 2006, Calciopoli showed that powerful clubs really could be punished for trying to bend the game behind the scenes. The pattern is not. Every strange football moment is fixed. That is lazy thinking. The pattern is, when huge rewards meet weak transparency, trust collapses. Transparency means letting people see clearly what happened, like opening curtains in a dark room. If the room stays dark, people imagine monsters in the corners. Some monsters may be real, some may be shadows, but the darkness is what allows both. Ronaldo's 1998 final sits exactly in that darkness. What did the doctors know? How much did the coaching staff understand? Did the tests really measure what mattered? Did Ronaldo feel clear enough to choose freely? Did the federation fear the public reaction if he sat out? Did the sponsor pressure the environment without giving a direct order? We cannot answer all of that with certainty, but we can understand why the question survived. This is where history gets uncomfortable. A conspiracy theory can be wrong in its details and still point to a real sickness in the system. Maybe Nike did not force Ronaldo to play. Maybe no one sold the final. Maybe France simply played brilliantly, which they did. But the broader sickness was real. The sport had turned a young man into a national symbol and a commercial engine so large that his absence felt impossible to accept. The jersey had become heavier than the body inside it. Look at France on the same night. While Brazil drifted, France stayed hard and clear. Zidane attacked set pieces. Didier Deschamps led midfield. Laurent Blanc was suspended for the final, so Frank Leboeuf stepped in and played with calm. Desailly's red card could have opened the door for Brazil, but France closed ranks. In other words, the winners did not need the mystery. They still had to play the match. And they did. That is another counterintuitive fact. The Ronaldo mystery can distract us from France's greatness. Brazil's confusion did not head those corners into the net. Zidane did. Brazil's illness did not make Petit run through in stoppage time. Petit did. Conspiracy thinking often steals credit from the team that won because it turns skill into scenery. A careful historian must hold both truths at once. Ronaldo's condition was a genuine mystery. France's victory was also genuine. At this point, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. In sports, the public sees the performance, but not the pressure system behind the performance. We see the player walking out. We do not see the sponsor meetings, the medical doubts, the federation politics, the TV schedules, the fear of letting down a country, or the private shame of saying, I cannot play. The field looks open, but many decisions are made in tunnels. And the human cost lands hardest on the people with the least control. Ordinary fans pay with belief. Players pay with their bodies and reputations. Coaches pay with blame. The powerful often pay with statements. That is why the Ronaldo case still hurts. It was not only a football question. It was a question about whether a young person can say no when an entire nation needs him to say yes. Ronaldo was not an old veteran making one last gamble. He was 21. He had the face of a kid and the burden of a monument. Ordinary Brazilians saw him as joy itself. Children copied his stepovers in alleys. Taxi drivers argued about him at red lights. Street vendors sold shirts with his number. When he walked out looking wrong, people felt not just worry, but betrayal by reality. The hero was there, yet not there. A candle had been lit, but the flame was blue. The people around him also carried scars. Edmundo became a symbol of this strange team sheet. Zagallo became a target for questions. Doctors became part of the story. Roberto Carlos, his roommate, became one of the people tied forever to the moment Ronaldo was found unwell. For fans, the match ended after 90 minutes. For them, it never fully ended. The human cost also includes the losing of trust in normal explanations. Once people believe a game may have been shaped off the field, every future game becomes a little less innocent. In Brazil, the 1998 final was folded into a wider feeling that powerful groups were always doing deals above ordinary people's heads. That is why the theory traveled from bars to newspapers to television to a formal inquiry. It gave language to a feeling many already had, that the beautiful game had become a business with beautiful lighting. But the winners, or at least the survivors, often did something different. France did not get pulled into Brazil's fog. They attacked weaknesses, trusted their set pieces, and stayed emotionally steady. In 1982, Algeria could not survive the schedule, but football as a system learned from the damage and changed the timing of final group matches. In 2006, Italian football punished major clubs, which showed that institutions can sometimes act after trust breaks. None of these fixes erase the harm, but they show that survival often begins with seeing the incentive clearly. There is also a modern health lesson. On 12th of June 2021, during Denmark's Euro match against Finland, Christian Eriksen collapsed on the pitch. The match was suspended because of a medical emergency, and UEFA later said it restarted after players requested it, and Eriksson was stable in hospital. That event was different from Ronaldo's in many ways, but it showed how public medical emergencies force sport to face the line between performance and life. 12. The question is not whether this pattern will repeat in the exact same way. History rarely repeats like a recording. It rhymes like a song played in a different room. The only question is whether you will hear the rhyme before the crowd noise covers it. If this channel helps you think differently about the world you live in, subscribe. It costs nothing, and it might change everything. The historical record shows that those who came through these moments with the most clarity largely shared three characteristics. First, they separated facts from feelings. That means they could say, Ronaldo had a real medical episode, the team sheet really changed, Brazil really lost 3-0, and no public proof has shown Nike ordered him to play. All of those can be true together. Holding several truths at once is hard, but it is how adults survive confusing history. Second, they looked at incentives before looking for villains. A villain is simple. A system is harder. If a sponsor spends huge money, if a federation depends on that money, if television expects a star, if a country demands glory, and if a player's identity is built on being unstoppable, then pressure does not need one face. It becomes weather. You cannot arrest weather, but you can learn to read the clouds. Third, they waited for documents, testimony, and time. In 2001, Ronaldo testified. In later years, Brazilian outlets revisited the conspiracy. The chamber records showed real contract numbers and real questions about image rights. The pieces did not produce the cartoon answer many fans wanted. They produced something more human. A sick player, unclear decisions, commercial pressure around the team, and a defeat so shocking that millions needed a larger explanation. 8. That is what survivors of confusing events do differently. They do not believe every official statement like children, but they also do not swallow every rumor like medicine. They build a map. They mark what is known, what is likely, what is possible, and what is just emotional smoke. Most people skip that work because outrage is faster, but outrage is a flashlight with weak batteries. It shows you one corner and leaves the rest dark. Current football has not removed the pressures that shaped 1998. It has multiplied them. The 2026 World Cup uses 48 teams in 104 matches, meaning more games, more broadcasts, more sponsors, more players under global attention, and more chances for the old patterns to rhyme in new forms. 13. That does not mean another Ronaldo mystery is coming. It means the ingredients are still in the kitchen. Money, fame, health, national pride, television, social media, a young star with a country on his back, a sponsor with a global campaign, a federation with contracts to protect, a fan base that wants certainty in a world that rarely gives it. The pot is bigger now. The heat is brighter. The cameras are everywhere, but the human body is still human. So when we look back at Ronaldo in 1998, we should resist two easy mistakes. The first mistake is saying it was definitely a giant plot and everyone was lying. The second mistake is saying nothing strange happened and fans were just being dramatic. The truth sits in the narrow bridge between those cliffs. Something strange did happen. A young superstar had convulsions before a World Cup final, was removed from the first team sheet, was restored to the lineup, and played poorly in a historic defeat. That is real. The proven evidence does not show that Brazil sold the match or that Nike forced him to play. That is also real. Now return to that apartment in Rio. The rice has gone cold. The drinks are warm. Your son has stopped holding the drawing. Of the number 9, on the television, French players lift the trophy, and Ronaldo walks through the wreckage with eyes that look far away. You do not know about future inquiries. You do not know about later interviews. You do not know that people will still argue about this night almost 30 years later. All you know is that the story you were promised did not happen. But history is often like that. It does not break with a scream. It breaks with a blank look on a young man's face. The mystery of Ronaldo in the 1998 World Cup Final is not powerful because it gives us one clean answer. It is powerful because it shows what happens when the world asks one person to be more than a person. A player becomes a flag becomes a product becomes a promise. And when the promise fails, everyone asks, who broke it? Maybe the final lesson is simple. Do not confuse the symbol with the human being. Ronaldo was not Brazil itself. He was not Nike itself. He was not FIFA, the CBF, or the dreams of a nation. He was a 21-year-old footballer who became the center of a machine too large for any one person to control. On 12th of July, 1998, that machine kept moving, and the world has been listening to the noise ever since. This is historical and educational analysis. It is not financial advice. Every individual situation is different. Please consult a qualified professional before making any financial decision. This video is not for everyone. Most people will dismiss it. But if one person in your life needs to hear this, share it with them. Not because it will change the world, because it might change their world. Subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next one.